As-Salamu Alaikum. As-Salamu Alaikum. Welcome to another evening of learning Islam with Masjid As-Sabur. This evening we're going to be talking very briefly about the miracles that God has brought about in our life. But as always, when we begin our discussions, we always begin Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, with the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I openly bear witness that there is no God but the one God. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And I openly bear witness that Muhammad is his slave, servant, and apostle. Now, when we talk about miracles of God, many times people are looking for angels coming out of the sky, or the earth being ripped apart and devils and angels coming out of the earth. But there are some miracles that are significantly more important than that we see every day. So I'd like to begin with an example of a miracle that is, at this point, one that cannot be duplicated by the human being. And so we're going to begin reading from the 23rd chapter of the Holy Quran, and we're reading verses 12 through 14. As always, when we begin reading from the Quran, we always begin, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge with God from the rejected enemy. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, with the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. And indeed, we created man from a draught of clay. Then we made him a drop in a secure dwelling place. Then of the drop we created a blood clot. Then of the blood clot we created a lump of flesh. Then of the lump of flesh we created bones. And we clothed the bones with flesh. Then we brought him into being as another creation. Blessed is God, the best of creators. May God bless the reading of his word. If you'll notice, what we are reading about is a 1400-year-old discussion of the creation of man. And it's a discussion of the creation of man that is just as relevant today as it was 1400 years ago. Because when you look at the creation of man, man is created by the fertilization of an ovum or egg in the womb of the mother by the father. Then from that fertilized egg, if you look at the progression of development, it first looks like just a clot of blood. Then that clot of blood becomes a lump of flesh. And then that lump of flesh begins to assume form. And then that form begins to develop bones and other matter and all of the separate organs and tissues that go into the creation of the human being, so that over a 9-month period it goes from that clot of blood to a baby that is born with all of its organs, with all of its muscles, with all of its bones, with all of its various things that make it a human being. Now many people say, oh yeah, well, we know about that. But think about it for just a moment. What kind of knowledge, what kind of universal experience is required to go into all of the details of the creation of a creature like man? And then think about this. Not only did God create man, He created every other example of living beings on this earth. All of them with differing methods of fertilization and birth and creation. Now many of you will go, well, that was evolution. Well, let's go back. What actually is evolution? Evolution is a process of getting more and more complex beings over a period of time in an organized and focused manner. Evolution is not random. Evolution is very focused. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Now, what is the entity or being that allowed us to have evolution? That's God. Then if you look at this earth, when we go back in history, in our holy book, the Quran, it says that the mountains were set like pegs on the surface of the earth. And then when you look at modern geologists, what do they say? The mountains are set like pegs on the earth. When you look throughout the whole creation, we talk about the levels of heaven that God created. And then when you go to the astronomers, there are various levels of the universe that exist as we go further and further into space. Why is that so important? It's so important because we neglect to reflect on the miracles that God has put before us every day. I like to look at what we call solar power. Now, what is solar power? Solar power is man finally figured out how to capture in a manner that he can use directly the power of the sun. And we talk about what a great creation it is. We no longer have to use, coal or oil or gas to create our electricity. But now let's look at the miracle. That coal, that oil, that gas would not exist if the sun had not been here when those creatures that left the deposits that become our coal, that become our oil, that become our gas, had lived. The coal is from the plants that lived and survived because of the sun that lived at the time that existed at the time that they lived. The oil and the gas are from those creatures that died millions and millions of years ago. But they lived because of the sun that was in the sky at that time. And now today we think it's a miracle that we can directly go from sunlight to power. Well, remember that grass that's on your lawn? That tree that's in your yard? They do that already. They call it photosynthesis. But it's actually sunlight going directly to energy to cause that plant to grow and develop. Amazing, isn't it? But it's a miracle because the human being finally figured it out a little bit. Now, why do I say a little bit? Because if you look at the amount of solar energy wasted through those solar panels, it's incredible. We're only capturing a small percentage of the energy that comes from the sun. But remember, God created the sun and allowed the sun to be the source of energy to make this world live. Billions and billions of years ago. And we're finally figuring out how we newcomers on the block can use the model that was established before we were even a thought in the history of this earth. Look at the miracles of God. You know, many of us laugh because, you know, when you read about Thomas Edison and the electric light, Thomas Edison says that I failed 9,999 times before I got my first light bulb. Remember, that's 1 out of 10,000 times he got a light bulb. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever lived in the country. We have something called lightning bulbs or lightning bugs. I used to run around with a jar to catch them, because when you caught a lightning bug, the lightning bug's tail would illuminate to give you light. Now, it wouldn't stay on, it would go periodically. But again, what is that a sign of? Of the potential of the light bulb that we now take for granted. Again, God gave us an example that we were then able to build on. Oh, another one. I just thought of it. What about the airplane? Oh, yeah, well, you know, that was the Wright brothers. Okay. Have the birds been here longer than the Wright brothers? I think so. Have the insects been here even longer than the birds? I think so. So, where did they come from? Oh, God created them. And then when he created them, he gave them the power of flight. Even something so odd as a bumblebee, which technically should not be able to fly, yet it flies. Why shouldn't it be able to fly? Well, it's too heavy for the size of its wings, but it flies. And then when we look at those things, we have the creation of the airplane, the creation of the helicopter. Then we go into the ocean and look at the octopus, and we have the creation of the rocket. You know, there is a saying in the Holy Quran in chapter 55, then which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? You know, when we begin to list the miracles of God, it's so easy for the human being to fall into, oh yeah, well that just was there. We really discovered it, instead of recognizing that the one who actually gave you that inspiration, who actually gave you that example to build on, was Almighty God, Allah, the creator of everything. But that's why God has to tell us over 50 times in that one chapter, which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? Because no matter what we say, there's going to be people go, oh, no, that wasn't God. That was nature. That was evolution. That was this. That was that. Where does that nature and evolution and everything come from? It comes from something moving through time in an organized manner to result in the creation of the world that we have now. When they look at the Golden One Center, they talk about how man built that. Well, wait a minute now, let's back up. None, and I repeat, none of the building materials in that facility came from anywhere but nature. And when we talk about them coming from nature, we talk about them coming from something that God left here on this earth that we could then take advantage of later. All of the metals were in the earth for us to harvest. And when we harvested them, we saw how we could purify them to make them into stronger metals. But we didn't create the original components of that metal. God did. When we look at everything that's going on today, the growth of the trees, the growth of all of the deposits of calcium that allow us to create concrete, All of that is something that originated with God. So when we talk about the miracles of God, we're not talking about mysterious stuff. I'm not going to talk to you about how, God waved his hand and then everything was. No. We're just going to talk about some very simple scientific principles that are laid out in our holy book, the Quran, that result in the world that we have today. Men build houses. Why do men build houses? Oh, look at the birds. The birds showed man how to build a house. The beavers showed man how to build a house. The animals showed man how to build a house. And then man perfected it. But man had to be given the example first. God is so wonderful. We like many times to use what we call mystery stories. What do I mean by a mystery story? A mystery story is simply a story that doesn't seem to have any basis in reality. And we have made religion seem as though it has no basis in reality. But religion is the one thing that is truly based in reality, and the one thing that if you use it allows you to have a greater opportunity to reshape reality to ends that will benefit you. You have to remember that the first centers of learning were centers of religion. The first centers of writing and reading were centers of religion. The first centers where they were actually practicing science were monasteries and mosques. We are not able to develop a better world without utilizing the religious blessings that have been given to us. Now, why am I talking about that? Because we are in a position to basically control matter. And the more we are able to control matter, the more it seems we are losing control of our souls. The human condition is not getting a lot better, even though we're getting a lot wealthier and a lot more at ease. Why isn't the human condition getting any better? Well, in order for the human condition to get any better, the human condition must make itself bow down to the knowledge of God and acknowledge God's power over its physical world. That seems easy, doesn't it? But you have to understand one thing about human beings. Human beings are very proud. Human beings like to think of themselves as self-sufficient. Human beings like to believe that they are the ones in control and not God. That's why in one verse of the Quran it talks about how God creates us and then we stand up as an open disputer against God. Isn't that crazy? Oh yeah, doesn't that remind you of something? Your children. Have you ever noticed you bear your children? Mothers bear the children, fathers raise the children, and then at a certain point that child stands up and says, y'all don't know nothing. I got it all. And what do? You wait for that moment when the child's world falls apart, and then you rescue them. And hopefully they will have learned enough from that to realize that they need to acknowledge that they are not all and all. The same thing goes for us as human beings. We may be full-fledged adults, think we got it all together, but until we acknowledge that God is truly in control of this world and this society, we will not have the guidance that we need to go to the next level. I point out the miracles of God only for you to recognize one thing. What God has left behind us is only symbolic of what God can do for us. What God has shown us through example, He has allowed us to perfect to the level that we are now, but there's even more that He has to show us and further that He can take us. But in order for all of that to happen, we have to submit. Now that's the hardest thing for the human being to do, to submit. Now why do I say that's the hardest thing? Think about how you feel about admitting you don't have control, admitting you don't know it all, admitting I cannot do it. Ooh, frustrating. And how we react to that sometimes is very destructive. We don't want to admit we are not in control, so we just destroy it. We don't want to admit we're not in control, so it must not be worth saving. God has given us the power to submit and grow. We have to take it. When religion was originated, the purpose of religion is to help improve the condition of human life. Religion embodies compassion. Religion embodies submission. And it is through compassion and submission that religion helps us to grow and develop as a society. Now, once we get to a certain level of development, man's arrogance has to reassert itself, and we have to claim we are in control. When we claim we are in control, we actually set ourselves back. I look at the world today and see all of the potential that is out there because of all of the wealth and power that exists, but it will never come to fruition until man decides to submit to God. Otherwise, it is the seeds of our own destruction. God has blessed us. You know, I have to add this comment. The word Muslim means one who submits. The reason that I wanted to give that comment is because we hear so much talk today about the threat from Muslims and all of this about Muslims, but Muslim means one who submits. We submit to God, and through our submission to God, we are able to embody that compassion and that recognition of the power of God so we can make our lives better. And as we make our lives better, we make this world better. Because the purpose of religion is not just to help a few, it's to help the whole society. Even if you don't believe. Remember the monks who in the Catholic Church originated the writing down of Latin and everything else? That benefit has come to us, even though we may not be Catholic and we may not even be religious. Remember, in the Muslim world, where Arabic was written down and the Quran became the exemplar book for the, I guess the best word is, for the best way to share al-Islam. And that writing has been a blessing to us ever since. The Quran even says, "He who taught man the pen, taught man that which he knew not." Remember, every scientist has said that one of the reasons they are able to make progress is because of what was written down by the scientists before them. And that's all a blessing that God has given us. So as we leave this message, please remember one thing. God blesses you with daily miracles. Don't ignore them. Be grateful. Be thankful. And be submissive. I'd like to close as I open with the greetings of all of the prophets from Abraham to Muhammad, the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. But before we go, I want you to remember Masjid As-Sabur. We're located at masjidassabur.com, .org on the web. We are on Facebook. Our location is 4926 15th Avenue, Sacramento, California. I'd also like to remind you that there are mosques all over the greater Sacramento area. Go by and visit. No Muslim will reject you. One of the things that God has made us responsible for is being good neighbors. So go meet your neighbors. I'd also like to remind everyone that we have our meeting at 1:30 p.m. every Friday. And if you want to contact us, masjidassabur.org or on Facebook, and we will get back to you. I close as I open with all of the greetings of peace from time immemorial. Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum. I want to remind everyone, Masjid As-Sabur, 4926 15th Avenue. Our new masjid is gorgeous. We just finished planting over 100 plants in front of the masjid. We just got through cleaning up the kitchen and getting ready to clean up all of the wudu stations, and we want you to come and join us. Every Friday, 1:30 p.m., Masjid As-Sabur, Sacramento. We are also on the web, www.masjidassabur.org. And we're on Facebook, so please like us. Again, we thank you for your patience and your time. We want to remind you that God truly has a message for you. And we want to remind you that we are here to give you any help that you may need. As God has taught us, He is a merciful God. As long as you come to Him and ask forgiveness, He will forgive you. So no matter where you are in life, there is a hope for change.